Peace. Once again, it's God time. Today I'd like to discuss the topic of having more than one wife. In many so-called religions, there's an allowance of having more than one wife. In fact, when we read it within the divine word, we see that there was an allowance of having more than one wife. The most commonly known person that's always used as an example with having multiple wives is the mighty King Solomon. But was that always the case? Was it always allowed for a man to have more than one? The Holy Messiah, the King, said from the beginning it was not so. God made male and female, one and one, and they two shall become one flesh. So how did it become popular and how did it become acceptable for a man to have more than one wife? In the beginning, after the corruption of all flesh, through what transpired in the garden with Eve, the first person we read of in having more than one wife was Lamech. Not Lamech, the father of Noah, but the Lamech that came from the seed of Cain, or the seed of the serpent, or the seed of the enemy. This Lamech is documented not only in catching a double homicide where he killed not one but two people, but it's also documented that he had two wives. The seed of the righteous, however, always had one wife. Adam is documented in only having Eve. The prophet Enoch is documented in having one wife. Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth all had one wife. 4 men, 4 women, 8 souls, as far as human beings that were saved during the time of the first planetary destruction. After the flood, continuing on, Abraham had one wife. Now, as you read, Abraham wasn't the one that sought himself another wife. It was actually Sarah who presented the opportunity for Abraham to deal with her handmaid, her slave woman, in order for her to bring forth seed, which would be counted as Sarah's seed for Abraham and Sarah. However, Abraham did not honor that oath, which is why Sarah said, "Let the Lord God judge between me and you." Abraham was so caught up in having a seed and having an offspring, a male child that would carry on his name, that he forgot about what he promised as far as an oath between him and his wife Sarah. As you read on and everything is put back in its perspective, we see that after the situation with Hagar and her being sent out with Ishmael, soon after, Sarah died. And it wasn't until then, when Sarah died, that Abraham moved on and he went and he got Keturah. As we read on with the seed of the righteous, Isaac only had one wife, which was Rebekah. And they taught their sons in the same fashion, but Esau, as we read, he went and he got himself 2 wives. However, Jacob was sent to get a wife, a singular, one wife of the daughters of Laban. But again, the enemy working through Laban, using Laban to cause Jacob to not only have Rachel, but to deceive him and allow him to lie with Leah as well, where he had 2 wives. And in that whole process, we see that Rachel could not have children, so she went and followed her great aunt in allowing Jacob to have her handmaiden, her slave woman, that she would bring forth children on behalf of them. And soon after, when Leah left off from giving birth, she did the same thing with her handmaiden. So now Jacob had 4 women that birthed the 12 tribes and 1 daughter of the children of Israel, which were the children of Jacob. Being that the slave women belonged to both of those sisters, to Leah and to Rachel, they're not counted as the matriarchs, but the matriarchy is counted as Rachel and Leah, which were 2 wives of Jacob. So now, as it stands, in the receiving of the law after the exodus out of Egypt, God made provisions for anyone that had more than one wife. It was not a free-for-all where you can deal with women any way you want it. There was laws set in place in regards to having more than one wife. And still, that wasn't dealt with correctly, as we see the example with King David. Fast forward to the coming of the king in the flesh. He made it clear that from the beginning it was not so. And the plan that was originally set in regards to one man with one woman. So now things are back in its proper order, according to what the Holy Majesty declared and made known. Having more than one wife is simply lust of the flesh. That's all it is. It's something lacking with the first wife, where the man is looking for that in another woman. Where with whatever it is the first wife is not willing to do, the second wife would be willing to do, or the third, or the fourth. And all of it deals with the flesh. It's all the lust of the flesh. When you look at the creation and why men and women came about, it was for them to procreate, to be fruitful and to multiply on the earth. It wasn't to engage in the pleasures of the flesh. No different from wildlife. We don't see animals telling their mate to turn around and to go into a different position or to please each other in ways that human beings do. But once flesh became corrupted, all these things were introduced to humanity, to the point where angelic forces decided to leave their natural estate so they can deal with women. And they too bear children, but these children were giants, which is another topic. And since then, flesh has been corrupted and has been contaminated with the lust thereof. But as it stands, once the Holy Messiah came into flesh and he set the record straight, we know that it's no longer permitted for a man to have more than one. It's now only permitted for a man to have one and to deal with that one flesh as himself. Which means the greatest example of loving thy neighbor as thyself is a husband and his wife. And this is a mystery that Paul spoke in Ephesians chapter 5. And it's also the key to having a successful marriage, as we read in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Not what man says, but what is written. I tried my best within the short time that's given of 10 minutes on TikTok to film this video, to give as much extensive understanding in regards to having more than one wife. I do have a full-length video on that within my page here on TikTok. If you scroll down, you will find it. And they too shall be one flesh. Peace. God time.